Good morning. Okay, so today we're going to be reading two poems, and they're from two different authors. So the first poem we're going to read about is from a man named Langston Hughes. He was born much before Maya Angelou in 1902. Remember, Maya Angelou, I believe, was born in 1923. So 1902 to 1967, and he was an African American writer known for jazz inspired poems that portrayed African American life in America. His work was controversial. So that means some people really enjoyed it, but it stirred up some heat, meaning some people found it a little troubling. I'm assuming because it had racial ties to it, and this was during a time of segregation. And then it's going to tell us why. Some critics worried that it played into racial stereotypes. So there we go. I was right. Right? Others praised him for reaching everyday people by using language and themes familiar to anyone who had the ability to read. So there was positive influence because he was able to connect with everyday people, but some people thought his writing was negative because of racial stereotypes. So we're going to be reading a poem called Mother to Son, and it was after the abolition of slavery, which means the end of slavery. Life was very hard for most African Americans, but poetry, music, and other arts were creative outlets that allowed them to express the hardships of their lives and to find inspiration, right? So be thinking of the time period, be thinking of how hard this must have been for the African American people. And as we notice, we always look at the picture as well as the title. And I see that the picture has a staircase, right? Kind of looks like some old, worn wood, very old fashion railings here. And mother to son. So I'm going to make an inference, right? An inference is to come to a conclusion based on background information that we see or hear. Based on the staircase, based on the title, Mother to Son, it sounds perhaps advice that a mother might give to her son. And maybe it's something about, I don't know, a staircase at home, or it has to be something about going upstairs, but I'm not sure. So let's read to find out. Notice too that poetry is not written in paragraph form, it's written in what we call stanzas. So stanza is 5 lines: one, two, three, four, five. One, two, three, four, five. So every 5 lines is called a stanza. So let's go ahead. That's kind of some new vocab for you. Let's go ahead and write stanza equals 5 lines. That's something that we want to know about poetry here. All right, here we go. Well, son, I'll tell you. Life for me ain't been no crystal stair. It's had tacks in it, and splinters, and boards torn up, and places with no carpet on the floor, bare. But all the time, I's been climbing on and reaching landings and turning corners and sometimes going in the dark where there ain't been no light. So, boy, don't you turn your back. Don't you set down on the steps 'cause you finds it's kinda hard. Don't you fall now, for I's is still going, honey. I's is still climbing, and life for me ain't been no crystal stair. Okay, so it sounds to me that this whole poem is almost a metaphor. But let's start with who's talking. Well, son, I'll tell you. So the person sounds like the older generation, right? Older gen would be who? Well, if we look, it doesn't tell us, but if we look at the title, it's pretty clear this has to be the mother talking to her son. So it's almost like here's the advice. Like here's her addressing her son, and all the rest of this is the advice that she's given to her son. And what she's telling him is she's comparing life to a staircase, right? So let's go ahead and write that. Compares life to a staircase. And she says, life for me ain't been no crystal stair. I've never been on a crystal staircase, but I can imagine it kind of reminds me of like Cinderella, right? And the glass slipper. Crystal would be something that's very expensive. There's nothing wrong with it. It might look pretty prestige. She's saying life has not been easy for her, right? So when we say crystal stair, life has been hard for her. We're kind of translating what is she saying. And then she continues by saying it has what makes it hard. So let's go ahead and box off or highlight what are the things that made her life hard if we're using this metaphor of a staircase. For one, she says her staircase has had tacks in it. It's had splinters. The boards have been torn up. No carpet on the floor. Bare, right? So all of these things kind of make a crappy staircase, right? And she's comparing that to her life. So she's saying she's had a lot of hardships in her life. So let's go ahead and kind of draw a little bracket and say all of these represent hardships in life. But then she kind of changes right here. This is where it turns into this is kind of darkness here, but then she kind of turns this into a positive stanza here. So this is kind of a turning point, let's say. And the turning point here is, we know it's a turning point because she says the word but, so let's circle that. But all the time, eyes have been climbing on and reaching landings and turning corners and sometimes going in the dark where there ain't been no light. So she's saying in life, she continues to move forward, right? Move forward despite challenges. And you'll notice it's not necessarily in proper English. It said, eyes have been climbing on. Um, or like she says down here, like it's kinder hard. This is what we call vernacular. Vernacular is the way in which someone talks depending on the region that they're from. So she's an African American woman and she's using a certain type of speech when she talks. And that's okay in poetry to write the way that we talk, just like in our narratives. I told you to kind of write the dialogue in the way that maybe your parent or grandparent speaks, right? My dad doesn't say wash, he says wash. So then the next part of the stanza is, I would say, the words of the wiser here, right? This is her advice to her son. Don't turn back. Don't you set down on the steps because you find it's hard. Don't fall because I'm still going. I'm still climbing, and life for me ain't been no crystal stair. So this is her advice to her son. And the advice is to not give up. Let's star that. That's really what the advice is for her son. So that is the lesson she wants her son to learn, and that would be aimed at the younger generation, which is her son. Okay. So I love this poem because it's relating life to a staircase, and how sometimes some people's staircases are really nice. It's new wood, there's railings, but some people's staircases don't have anything to hold on to. Sometimes there's splinters on the floor, sometimes the boards are broken, and everyone leads a different life, right? And so we just have to remember kind of the life lesson here is that, I'll put LL for life lesson, is that everyone has their own battles, right? Everyone's facing their own battles in life. And we're comparing it to a staircase. So we have words of the wiser. We also, let's see if we have any again and agains. I feel like we could definitely like and um eyes, like I'm still going, I'm still climbing, right? Eyes, again and again, and could be again and again because she's really trying to make a point here. Um, Maybe you can find another one here. Um, but that's what I'm seeing right now. Memory moment, I don't really see. I don't really see an aha moment. I don't see a contrast contradiction. Um, but I am wondering, she says, I'm still going, honey. I'm wondering if her life was so hard. A question that I have, I'm going to make a tough question. How did she learn to persevere? A lot of people give up when their life is hard. So I'm going to ask my own tough question. If she's teaching her son to keep going, even when the staircase is really, really bad and torn up, she must have learned from someone how to keep persevering. So let's go ahead and write our own tough question here. Pause, obviously, and go back as you need to get all of these annotations in. We will do the other poem probably on Monday because we have shortened class periods, at least for my morning classes. You will do the other poem on Monday. My afternoon classes, I will have a separate video for the other short poem. All right, happy Friday.